Hello and welcome to Soups and Sabers. My name is Jordan. With me today is Ron. How are you today, Ron?
I'm doing good, man. The MCU is back, confirmed, at least until the next project comes out and everyone complains about it. But I'm doing great because the MCU is back as of right now.
And Chris. How are you today, Chris?
We're back, baby. It's so, dude. I stayed up late last night, and I'm so glad I did because it is so good.
If you don't know what we're talking about Daredevil, Born Again. This week, the Devil of Hell's Kitchen has returned, has resurfaced. Where has he? Because by the end of the intro, he's not around anymore. So we'll talk all about that here. But just good to be back with Daredevil. So I guess let's go through real quick before we dive into that and just say if we watched the original series, what our thoughts on the original series was, because I know for some people this is a new thing for them. So I'll start. I watched the first two seasons when they released. I watched The Defenders when it released. And then I fell off a bit, was ready for season 3, and then it got canceled a couple weeks after it premiered, I believe, that I hadn't had a chance to get around to it yet. Somebody said it had a cliffhanger, so I was like, you know what? I don't even want to watch this then. I was kind of out on most of the Netflix stuff at that time. So I left it. And then when they announced Born Again, I was like, great, I'll have to go watch it. Right. And I finished season 3 a couple days before this premiered. And season 3 is the best, I think. It was legit. So if you haven't watched any Daredevil before this and you watched Born Again and you're listening to us talk, just press pause on this or listen to this full episode and then go and watch the original Daredevil. But let's go with Ron. Tell us your background on the character or the show of the original Daredevil.
Yeah, so like you, I did watch the first two, way back then. Did not watch the third season, and actually, I didn't even really have time to watch the whole thing in the lead up to this, but I did watch the finale just to kind of see where we were set up, even though, we've had like Hawkeye and Echo and these things like that since that have also kind of painted that picture a little bit. But, I liked it overall. Like, I've always thought Daredevil was cool. He's never been one of my like top 5 Marvel characters by any means. You all know me. I'm much more of a like cosmic, spacey, mystical kind of fan when the Jean, Nova, like that kind of stuff. So there was no hate on on Daredevil, but he was never at the top of my list. So I wouldn't, I enjoyed the show at the time when it was airing, but it definitely, didn't really blow my socks off or anything like that. But I was still super excited in the lead up to this show to see how they would continue all that. And so far, they've done a pretty damn good job, as we'll get into here today. So not the biggest Daredevil guy, but I have a feeling this show may start to change that a little bit.
I was going to say, not a real fan, Ron. You couldn't even get his name right. Deadpool.
Yeah. I've always had you on the brain, man. That's a Deadpool. What can I say?
He wears red. All right. What do you want me to say? No, that's interesting. My first experience with Daredevil was actually like the character itself was I was a big Spider-Man fan growing up, and my dad was subbed to Spider-Man for a bit. And we have like the 390s, like 390s of Amazing Spider-Man, somewhere around there, 380 something to the 390 something that we had. And he makes an appearance in his black costume with the red D. Yeah. And I remember reading that comic book. And then, of course, he appeared in the original Spider-Man animated series for a couple episodes. And I had the DVD of that. And then, of course, I actually went and saw the Ben Affleck movie. As a kid, I loved it. Didn't know why people didn't like this. I was, 12? I was eating that up. All right. Haven't revisited it since. It's on Disney Plus. I might revisit it soon and see how that is. But yeah, so outside of the Netflix show, that's my history with the character. Chris, give us a little background on you and Daredevil.
Okay, so I ate the Netflix stuff up. Like the all 3 seasons, I was just like hooked. I really like the Defenders. I was pretty big into Luke Cage. Like Jessica Jones was like a little bit on, but like the Daredevil show is the reason I like gave all of that stuff a chance in the first place, because this Daredevil show was the hook. I mean, wait, you got Daredevil and the Punisher, and it was just this awesome. Wilson Fisk was such a badass. I was like, this is like it. It came at a time when I needed a little bit of that thing that Batman gives you, but like I didn't want to watch Arrow. Um, but
I was going to say that too, Chris. Given how big of a Batman fan you are, it's sort of a natural thing for you to be drawn to the character.
It's dark, it's gritty, it's street level. The idea of Matt Murdock, being this Catholic and then having the flip side of the devil it's they do a lot with that. I love the imagery with all the red, and it's just I think this is just an addicting character. So I mean, I've done a bit of a deep dive in comics lately. I've read probably 24 issues of Daredevil in the last week. So like I'm like really feeling that I was ready for this. But the Netflix show, absolutely love the Netflix show, and I think the the thing that I loved about the Netflix show was there were so many storylines. You had the Ben Urich storyline. You had, with going on with Karen. You had the Foggy stuff. There's so much going on and interweaving. So I thought is such a deep story. You felt like you lived in the world. You felt like you were in Hell's Kitchen with Matt Murdock. So yeah, the fact that this feels like a continuation, it's just chef's kiss. I'm here for this. I Netflix Daredevil, one of my biggest Marvel things. So it's probably
Yeah.
Guardians and Spider-Man are like my top two things in Marvel. This is number 3.
Yeah, the Jessica Jones, if we're going through the Defender stuff, I love season 1. I don't think I watched season 2. Luke Cage, I loved the first half, and then Mahershala Ali died, and I was like,
Yeah.
this Diamondback was so over the top campy that I was like, no, you got rid of the best character in the show.
Yeah.
And then Iron Fist, I watched season 1. I didn't watch season 2. And Defenders, I thought was fine when it aired, but I just rewatched it for this, and it's boring. Defenders is a little boring. Okay, so we'll get into Daredevil Born Again. A little background behind this show is announced in July 2022. Planned 18-episode first season. I believe also episodes were probably going to be shorter. They were not going to focus on as much of the it was going to be more courtroom stuff, which I know this show is still going to do because they didn't scrap everything. Yeah. But plans have changed. This is 9 episodes. Season 2 is filming now and is 8 episodes long. What about that, Ron? We have a news like season 2 is already filming and it's going to come out next year. Talk about a normal release schedule for TV, huh?
Yeah, it's something we've been pounding the table for on this show and really on all of our shows before we consolidated everything together here into Soups and Sabers for a while, whether we're talking Marvel, DC, Star Wars, whatever. Like you shouldn't like have completely forgotten what happened in the last season of the show you watched before the time it comes around again. In a time where we are now it's not crazy if a show takes 3 years in between seasons. Like it's crazy, but it isn't in the sense of it happens. It's like
it happens all the time. Yeah.
Nowadays. Yeah. And it's something that has really hindered Marvel in particular in that regard, because there was this era where they set up so many of these characters in their own shows going back to 2021 even, and we haven't seen anything of them since. So to know we're getting that continuity and that next year we are going to get almost did it again, a Daredevil season 2. It's very promising. And it's just one of the many things that I've loved about this show so far.
Yeah, thankfully the writers went on strike, I guess, and they watched this and said, "We need to fix this." So once
Yeah.
they were able to, they went back and hired uh Scartapane, who is the creator. Dario Scartapane is, well, not creator, the showrunner, and Benson and Moorhead to direct the added episodes. They reworked some scenes. We'll talk about what things of those have continued and what things of those, were the new stuff as we go, I guess, because I have a pretty good idea on that from credits and what we know. But yeah, so this show picks up after the events of season 3 of Daredevil. Um, years later, though, years later. This is, I think, if we were putting timestamps on it, like about 6 to 7 years after Daredevil season 3, which ended in 2018. And this show is, I think, around 2025, 2026 for the election. And then, Fisk becoming mayor the next year.
Enough time for Foggy to have a complete glow up, however long that takes.
Yeah, true.
New hair.
He looked good in
everything was
season
great.
3, though, too. All right, he
True.
had it together then too. But yeah, starring Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock. Vincent D'Onofrio is back as Kingpin. Deborah Ann Wall is back as Karen Page. Eldon Hansen was back briefly as Foggy. Wilson Bethel back as Bullseye, and then a whole slew of new cast members like Michael Gandolfini. We had Kamar de los Reyes, who unfortunately passed away with from cancer, but he is White Tiger in this show. And we have some new Heather Glenn is Murdoch's new love interest. And did she look familiar to you, Ron? Because I don't know if you IMDb'd her at all after this, but I have a connection here.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of it, but I know what you're about to tell me. I'm going to be like, no.
She played Mother Coral in The Acolyte.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I could see it in the face after I looked it up. I was like, that's where I know her from. I was like looking at her like she looks so familiar to me. Yeah. Her name is Margarita Laviva. She is Heather Glenn. And we also have Kirsten McDuffie in this. Nikki M. James is playing Kirsten McDuffie. She's also on Severance a couple times in season 1, which is one of the best shows on TV. We get introduced to BB Urich as well, and Clark Johnson as Cherry, the former retired police officer who is his investigator. And we also get the return of Vanessa Fisk here as well. And we'll get John Bernthal later on as Frank Castle, but not in these episodes. So let's just go off our initial thoughts with these 2 episodes. What stood out to us right away, what our overall thoughts were, and then we can kind of dig into more plot stuff afterwards. But we'll start
Chris,
with
Chris. Why don't you
Chris.
kick us off?
Yeah.
And we're going spoilers for all this, right?
Yep. Spoiler warning is in effect.
All right, cool. The first 15 minutes of this show are some of the most incredible 15 minutes when you have Matt Murdock hearing Foggy's heartbeat and Karen begging for him to hang on. They're almost here. While he's getting knives stabbed, like thrown at him, and like, how many knives were in him? It's just absolutely the visual of the show is just insane, and the action. And you just had Foggy saying, "I didn't want to give you an excuse to be Daredevil," and dude, and when he, oh god, and the worst part is, I kind of thought Foggy was done for. They said there was a tragedy. We all kind of thought it was going to be Foggy, but I'm like, dude, they were so happy. He was so confident. He's so put together. The thing I love about Foggy is he just needed confidence, and all of a sudden he's Foggy Nelson, man. And dude, God, it kills me. they were too happy. It was like when you're watching a scene in a car and you know there's going to be an accident because like it's like why, right? There's why are they so happy? So it just really sucked. But it was such a great 15 minutes that it took me 3 or 4 scenes of it unfolding and it completely decompressing from that like palpable moment to actually be calmed down from that scene. And I think I enjoyed the second episode more because of that, because I think that first scene got me up here, and then the show kind of went down there. Um, and I think I enjoyed the second episode more because I calmed down, and it was very Wilson Fisk oriented, and I really like what they're doing with Mayor Fisk and Vanessa, and the appearance of having to look clean, and I think they're onto something. They're cooking. I have really no real nitpicks other than there's a couple shots that I thought looked a little weird, but honestly, this is for a Disney Plus TV show. They're already setting the bar for me. I mean, Loki was real damn good. This has a chance to set the bar.
And they also do a pretty good job of showing you really quick that it ain't your mama's Disney Plus show either. It is gritty, raw, violent, like everything that somebody who was a fan of the Netflix show could have been a little trepidatious on coming in. They silenced that pretty quick. I mean, when Matt throws Bullseye off the roof and just that thud, like, sorry, I probably just broke your guys' eardrums, but like, it was just, that was the first moment that made me like jump out of my chair for an MCU project, probably since Major showed up at the end of Loki. I was just like, whoa, like, even like knowing what we know about the character, and he has the sort of reinforced exoskeleton now in the comics. It's actually adamantium, but I know that when they made this show, they didn't have those rights yet, and it was, I don't know. So maybe
I don't think they ever said what it was at the end of season 3. So he could have gotten an upgrade after that too. You know, he could have. You know, if we now knowing what we know from Brave New World, that they were mining the adamantium, he could have an upgrade. Yeah. But yeah, they just kind of show him getting it done on the in the finale. I don't recall them saying what it was.
So I think the best way that I can sum up how I feel about this was a line that Foggy had that was very much intentionally placed when three of them are walking down the street together. And I forget what Karen even says to prompt him to say this, but he goes, "It's not nostalgia. It's reverence for the past and hope for the future." Like, that's exactly what I got from these 2 episodes. It's the soul of the Netflix show is definitely there, but this show isn't being made just to satiate Netflix fans and like to try to cheaply bring back an old audience with an unnecessary story. There is a very important, very necessary story that's being told here with Fisk obviously being mayor and Matt going on this whole crazy journey now in the light of Foggy's death and how that, you know, pushes Karen out and she's off in San Francisco now. It's just the perfect combination, I think, of that nostalgia and stuff for the old fans while still telling a very necessary and compelling story. I have a few questions and a few notes. I think my biggest hang up probably lies in something that's outside of the show, but that came out after these first 2 episodes released, which we'll get into in a little bit. But for the most part, it's if you're a fan of the original or if you're a fan of the just Marvel and like this is your first foray into Daredevil, I think you should be very happy right now.
I think a lot of people wanted this to be season 4. It's not season 4. This is Daredevil Born Again season 1. Like somebody posted, they thought it was funny that there was a recap in episode 2, but no recap for episode 1. And I was like, that would confuse a bunch of people when they turn on season 1 of a show, episode 1, and then it's like previously on Daredevil, and it shows everything from seasons 1 through 3. People will be like, did I press the wrong button? Like, why am I, this is the first episode of the show. Why is there a previously on? Like, it wouldn't make sense, right? This is not your grandmother's Daredevil, right? This is this is a new show, and the bones of the old show that they were making before the strike are still there, of course, right? Kirsten is the Foggy, the Cherry is the Karen, right? Like they have those same roles. Why are they in this show? Because originally this was a soft reboot without connections. And originally Foggy was going to be killed off screen. So if you're upset that they killed him in 15 minutes, be happy you saw him at all.
I don't think he's dead, by the way.
I think he is. I understand what you're talking about, what you just saw today, but I think he is dead, and there are ways to bring back. For people that don't know, they said Eldon's coming back for season
Flashbacks,
2,
probably.
Flashbacks, or even like a vision, like a ghostly vision, ghostly vision or something. I don't know.
It would fit really in with. It would fit really in with Daredevil to have him being haunted by the ghost of Foggy and like seeing him everywhere.
Well, he can't see anything, so it'd be kind of tough. But that's my only hang up with it.
No, but like hearing his voice or something. I don't know.
There you go.
But yeah,
it could. But I do want to point out there is also comic precedent of a story where they do a fake out Foggy death, and it just, I don't know, man. That moment I think will be looked back on far less fondly and far less impactful if they do decide to bring him back. But just while we're on the topic, I have to say it because, like, I feel like every time Brad Winderbaum opens his mouth these days, like, all due respect to him because he's very good at his job, but it makes me want to put my head through a wall. When he's cagey, or he's not cagey enough when he should be cagey, he's way too truthful. And when he should be truthful, he gets all dodgy and cagey. It's like, he just steps in it. It's like, somebody asks him about a character that they have no plans for. And it's, well, that's something that we'd certainly consider revisiting at some point down in the future. And then every publication runs with it. And it's season 2 of Hawkeye confirmed. And then, like, in a situation like this, where he gets asked about Deborah Ann Wall and I forget the actor's name, Eldon. You don't have to. You could just be like, we'll see what happens in season 1. Like, you don't have to just completely deflate that moment that we just saw on screen and be like, but actually he'll be back. Like, at least let it sit for a little bit. So Brad Winderbaum, you've been killing me recently, man.
I would have liked, if they were going to announce this early, I would have liked 2 or 3 weeks from now. So I agree with your point.
That would be better. Yeah. Even that would be better.
So I have to put most of this blame actually on these Twitter accounts and these interviews. What he says about like Hawkeye and stuff is very normal executive speak. We would love to use those characters again. But then all these freaking accounts have to go out and be Hawkeye. They want to use him again. No shit, they want to use him again. He's one of their characters. What are you talking about? Like, and then it'll be like discussing film says this, and then like they'll just all keep retweeting the same crap.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The other side of it with this Eldon stuff, I can see 2 sides of this here. They're going to be filming on the streets of New York, so this could be getting out ahead of, like, you're going to see him on the streets, or like, he's going to be filming. There's going to be stuff out there. 2, it usually gets leaked by the trades anyway, with like Deadline being like, and he's returning and this, we don't know how, right? But like he's returning. And 3, I think that some of this stuff was filmed earlier in advance, and then all these accounts have it scheduled that as soon as the episode's done dropping, they're like, we asked him about Foggy, is he coming back? And it like they immediately put it out there, where maybe he thinks it's going to get released later, or just whatever, he's just answering a question, whatever. This is the downside of social media, and I say this as somebody that's a part of it, and we're doing a podcast about it, and we share clips and we do stuff like this, but the more professional outlets of this base their whole posts around this kind of stuff. And like, it's become this ecosystem that just feeds into each other, where then we see somebody else run with it, and then guess what? They're like, hey, I saw this, so now I'm interviewing Brad Winderbaum. Let me ask him about this. And he kind of gives the same answer, or he has to clarify an answer. And then the people are like, no, you saw the first interview. You didn't see the second interview where he actually said this thing. And it's like, just slow down. Just slow down.
Yeah.
Enjoy the show. You know, that's off topic. But anyway, that just pissed me off.
Yeah. I should also add that I think another reason that I'm a little salty just in general towards Brad Winderbaum is that he seems to be routinely the harbinger of death. Anytime bad news about Nova comes around, he's the Grim Reaper standing there with the scythe. So I think that definitely plays into it too. But
also like, I understand they have to ask about this stuff, but it's also like they ask him about Nova and Kevin Feige about Nova all the time. There's never been an official announcement about Nova at all.
Yeah.
But for some reason, everybody has to ask about it. So it seems like we're making progress. And then if there is like a setback, then it seems like a bigger setback. But it's like, if they had something to announce, they would announce it. Like, that's kind of stuff. Like, I feel like I would be a good interviewer, not to like toot my own horn, because I would not ask him about that stuff. Like, I know that
not putting myself
people have to ask him about it, but like, I'd be asking other questions because I'm like, they're not going to break the news that Nova was greenlighted to me. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? They're saving that for San Diego or something.
Yeah.
Yep.
I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes. I was a little bummed Foggy died. We all kind of got that. I would say it was pretty well spoiled out there. I kept, like we said in the leak episode that we did, I kept acting like that's not official. We're not sure that's actually happening. Maybe they filmed a side where he does get murdered, and maybe they also filmed one with Karen getting murdered, and they're gonna shift it around, or he's not actually gonna die. If they keep it, I didn't want him to die. But now that he's dead, I feel like you got to keep it. I think if you don't keep it, it can ruin it. I know we all want Foggy back, but I'd rather just have him be back in flashbacks. There's a lot of time missing where we don't have these characters together. You can show some of that. How did they handle the blip? Or, show them at the height of their game with Nelson, Murdoch, and Paige, do that. I don't want them to bring him back just because people wanted him back. The showrunner, I watched the interview with him where, he said, look, that was already decided before I took over. And I said, the only way I'm going to get the job, I'm going to take this job, is if I can bring him and Karen back to at least show that, because you can't just start with him already dead and it's not going to hit. Like, you're not going to feel his death. And that's the right move, in my opinion. Because if I just turned on this episode and it's like, Foggy died last year, and now Matt is not a vigilante anymore, I'd be like, what? What is this? And that's what the rumor was. Remember, we did an episode about it, I think, Ron, where they said 4 episodes. He wasn't going to suit up until episode 4 or 5 of the original series of like the 18 episodes they were planning. And that was mind-boggling to me. So, of course, then he goes in and adds this scene at the beginning to have Daredevil doing Daredevil stuff. And that kind of, when you release it with episode 2, that tied you over until that final scene of episode 2 where he loses it again and he starts going down that path again. And I think you needed to see, he says a line was crossed. And it's not just, I thought he did kill him at that point. I did. And I was going to be upset that he broke his rule. But, obviously he's got the adamantium or vibranium or some sort of reinforced spine. He's fine, right? But in his mind, he crossed the line by even trying to do it, right? That is his thought process there. It is. And not even that. You can even read it as a line was crossed in the sense of because I was a vigilante, my friend was killed because they were coming after me and they wanted me to feel that. So I put him in harm's way. So there's like two ways you can read that, like a line was crossed. I choose to have read it, but like a mix of both. Like he's upset that he let Foggy die because he, I mean, like Dex knew his identity. So there is something there, right? And then you have the other side of it of he thought he was killing him.
Yeah.
And at that, it's hard to come back from. But luckily, he didn't kill him. And I like that they added that scene too, where you see Cherry see him without the mask on, and that kind of sets up why he knows about him. And I guess this is all the stuff that was in the reshoot. So I guess he was just going to start off knowing, and just, you know, already know he's Daredevil or something. So I liked seeing that scene and seeing that opening scene. I know there's been some complaints about the CGI, but to be honest, like,
every project though. And there's a couple shots you can honestly say, yeah, it looks a little wonky. Who cares? But every project now.
And the choreography in that scene is insane. Like there's
choreographer too. Same choreographer as the original show. People trying to say it's not as good. It's like it's the same guy. So take it up with him, I guess.
Yeah.
I will. I will. Oh no, Chris, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. I was just gonna say when he breaks his rule, when he throws him off the roof, it felt deserved. It felt like that is something like if you're gonna break your rule, that's the most forgivable way for me to like see it. Like it's not like I don't think he had any sense of Matt Murdock in his brain right there. The devil was completely taken over at that point. He was completely Daredevil. He was completely angry. He was in his emotions. And I didn't get real, like, this is when you need a character like Foggy to say, wait a second, Matt, stop punishing yourself. But hopefully Cherry kind of does that for him.
Yeah, very powerful imagery too when they, like, Karen's on the ground, like, holding Foggy, and then this body just comes raining down right in front of her, and she looks up and Matt's there. There's a lot of like powerful imagery about like Matt being up there and not down there, and like Matt not being there is what caused Foggy to be allowed to be in the line of fire, essentially.
Well, the way I read this was that she didn't want to turn around because she didn't know if it was him or Bullseye. You know, she's like, if I turn around, like that might be Matt.
Yeah.
And then she finally does, and she kind of is like, "Whew, okay, it's not Matt."
Just the asshole.
Yeah. This I forget what I was going to say, but it was something you had said right before that I was going to latch onto. But anyway,
so I want to touch on something that you were talking about, ironically, Jordan. So you talk about in that last scene of episode 2 when he sort of snaps and just goes off on those 2 police officers. I'm very glad that I'm assuming, by the way, that that's going to be what draws him back into the suit. You know what I mean? I think the whole not being a vigilante anymore thing is basically kaput after that. And it's one of many things that in this show so far have moved very fast. And I think that was one of the things that worked very well in the original show too. They would have these mini arcs where it didn't feel like things would be dragged down, and you know, each story would have, 2-3 episodes to kind of tell what it wanted to. Felt very comic booky in that way. Same thing with Fisk's mayoral whole situation going on there. They could have milked that through the whole first season, been about his campaign and all this stuff. And it probably would have been good, but I feel like it would have just felt a little draggy at points. Whereas by the end of the first episode, he is the mayor. The story is off and rolling, and we are on to what's next. And I love that sort of breakneck pace that we're getting. And it seems like that's going to be the calling card of this show. Excuse me. Like knowing that we still have a whole Punisher arc to get to and a whole Muse arc to get to, and we still have all this White Tiger stuff. It seems like it's just going to be bing, bang, boom in this show. And I think that's one of the things that people liked about the Netflix show a lot, and something that will help this show not fall into that same trap that every MCU show falls into, where they set up this one big story in the beginning and they sort of, plod their way up to it. And then by the time we get to episode 6, it kind of falls flat. And the one thing they've been building up towards all season doesn't quite hit as hard as it should. There is still a through line narrative of this season in Fisk's mayoral stuff, but there's so much other stuff going on and so many little subplots in here that I don't think the whole season, and whether or not the whole season's good, relies solely on this one plot point, sticking the landing, so to speak. So I think that's a major benefit this show is going to have going for it.
Disney and Marvel are very confident in the show. They gave the critics the whole season. And a lot of critics say it might start off a little slow, but like the final episode is incredible, is what I keep reading. So like, look, and again, if we kind of go back to what Dario has done when he came into this show, he rewrote the pilot, and then he wrote episodes 8 and 9. And those are the ones that are directed by Benson and Moorhead. The rest of the 2 through 7, some of those bones are still the original stuff they were shooting, but have been edited with different tone by just editing or by adding extra scenes into those episodes. So obviously, like episode 2, there is a scene that I think was inserted. Well, the fight scene I think was inserted into episode 2. I do. I think they were like, all right, we haven't had him suit up at all in these first 4. We're going to add a fight scene at the end of episode 2 or something. I feel like that's the kind of stuff that was added in. Maybe even the scene where he's talking with Cherry and he's holding the devil horn, because that was given to him from Karen in episode 1, which she was not originally in the show. So I think some of those things you can kind of track and be like, that's new, that's old, that's new, that's old. But I'm very excited to see where it goes here, because episode 2, I saw somebody say this online, I forget who, but that scream at the end when he lets it out is kind of like Fisk is right that I like having this side of me, and damn it, I'm mad that he's right. But I am, he defeats these cops so easily, really, and it's just like I don't want to be this right now, but I'm good at this.
And even to take that a step, Chris, just really quick, to even take that a step further in that scene, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this too. He sees the Punisher tattoo on one of the cops' wrists, and in the original show, that was like a big thing, right? Frank trying to basically show Matt that his way wasn't working when it came to the criminals, and Matt kind of like finally acquiescing in a little bit of a way and being like, all right, maybe my way isn't working so much. So I think that like seeing that imagery of the Punisher just totally emboldened what you were just talking about, Jordan, of that, I like being this way. I like doing, fighting and fight. And what did they, I forgot exactly how they put it. It was like, look out for those Murdoch boys, you know what I mean? Sort of thing. Like he enjoys the fight. He enjoys the hunt in that way. And I think just seeing that, that little representation of Punisher just kind of helped hammer that home and built that frustration even more, knowing that, he always had this sort of perceived moral superiority over the Punisher because the Punisher kills and he didn't. But at the end of the day, he's no better. Okay, Chris, my apologies. Didn't mean to cut you off.
You're good. I was going to go on a completely different thing. But you're right about the Punisher imagery. Like the tattoo obviously means something. And, I think it's a little ironic. We've seen in reality the Punisher logo being used incorrectly, especially by a certain crowd. And I think that's going to be really addressed and be a little bit of a meta like storyline in here. But I just love the confidence of Matt Murdock. It's like you got a gun to his head. You can feel it against his forehead because you don't want to do this. I love it. I love the confidence of just being like, You know how easy this is gonna be for me, guys.
Call an ambulance, but not for me.
That's actually really what it's like.
And they're all sitting there like, this
Yeah.
guy's blind, and then all of a sudden he just gets up like, bam.
But I think it's so important that they had the Punisher tattoo there, because these people in the train station, though, they're beating up on a helpless guy. And here they see this guy, they're like, oh, he's blind. What's he going to do? And they're pummeling him. They're getting rid of the problem. They don't care. They see him as this little nobody. And the fact of the matter is that he's kind of standing up against that. And that, I think, we've kind of laid it on thick with the imagery of the show, but I think that's very important.
And do you think that is sort of what's going to bring Frank Castle out of his hole, so to speak? Wow, weird way to put it, but you like, like, do you think that all of these cops sort of forming this weird little like culty thing where they all kind of misuse the Punisher logo, and like very much like you said, in the way that we see a lot of real world implications of that? Do you think that's what's basically going to cue his intro into the show?
I think so. I think they're setting that up. I think they're laying the groundworks for that. And I think Punisher is such an interesting character because he's so convinced that he's correct. And he's so convinced that his way is the only way. And his way is the only way is so misconstrued by others. So I definitely think that's being set up. And I think it's going to be one of those palpable fight scenes that's just like that only the Punisher can bring. So anytime you have the Punisher and Daredevil mixed together, I think it's just a recipe for good. Like, it's just a recipe for good TV.
I do wonder. I wonder if this is set up for something later, and it might not be addressed with these cops. Maybe just like this will be a pattern throughout certain cops that they deal with. Because originally this show was a little bit more, like I said, standalone in the sense of, I think you would have had like your White Tiger arc, and then you would have like another case that comes to them, and then another case that, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And it makes me wonder, like, is this the connective tissue they're building with it to then have Punisher walk in? Because Punisher was going to be in the original version as well. So, I mean, there could be that connection, or it could just be like maybe this cop isn't going to factor in by then because maybe he'll dispatch of this cop in the White Tiger situation. But then, like, maybe we'll see more cops are doing this, and that'll be Punisher being like, "That's not what
that's
I want."
What I
like,
think.
Yeah,
I think this is a group of cops that have, in wake of whether they are pro Fisk or anti Fisk, I'm not really sure, but a group of cops that have basically banded together in a city that they don't feel represented anymore, and have sort of taken on this mantle themselves of, again, abusing the Punisher mantle and thinking, the only ones that are going to bring these vigilantes down and bring proper justice is us, just like the Punisher, but they're going to be doing it to the wrong people, basically. They're the Punisher in message, just not in target. And I think that's going to be, Frank Castle's going to catch wind of that and be like, hey, man, this ain't, sorry, I'm doing his Shane voice from The Walking Dead. But I think it's going to piss him off that there's this group of essentially rogue police officers that are twisting his message to fuck with basically innocent people. And I can say that on here because they said fuck in the episode.
Sure. One thing to point out, though, episodes 5 and 6 are being released together. March 25th. And
yes.
And I think my thought process is you're going to get a bit of a slow burn in episode 3 and 4, and it's by episode 4 you're going to think, man, something's really going, and that 5 and 6 is going to be that big wowing moment. I think it's
like a Punisher. It could be a Punisher two-parter.
Yeah, something like that. I think the season turns at that multi-episode release.
Is that the only other episodes that are getting multi-release?
Correct.
Are they... Okay.
And there's no breaks because it goes March 25th and then it's April 1st, April 8th, April 15th.
Okay.
They also had the double up twice if they didn't want it to release during Andor. So
Okay.
that
True.
makes sense as well. But episode 5, I think, is the shortest of the bunch. So releasing that with another episode would also make sense
Smart.
to be like, hey, this is the week we'll double up. So that way you're not upset you got 39 minutes instead of 45 or whatever.
Mhm.
But all the rest of the episodes are pretty lengthy. It's the longest. It's going to be the longest Marvel show on Disney Plus.
Mhm.
So that's good if you worry about runtime. Let's talk about BB Uric here. She
Okay.
gets some featured stuff here. She's videoing, people on the street. This is how we kind of get New York as a character. We get to see the people of New York actually sharing their thoughts on Mayor Fisk and everybody else, and Daredevil's, disappearance and everything. So what do we make of her? Does she, Ben Urich was killed by Fisk, or was set up killed by
Yeah.
Fisk. What do we think here? She kind of toes a dangerous line by getting Gandolfini's character to get her some one-on-one time with Fisk.
Yeah. I'm a little kind of nervous for her too. Just first of all, like the way that Fisk approaches that when he finds out that she's Ben's daughter, just like, just knowing what we know.
Oh, I know
just
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you bastard. But I think she's going to find herself in some hot water. To what extent, I don't know. But I think I could definitely see it being a thing where, they've already introduced this dynamic with her and I forget his Blake. Last name is Blake, but Gandolfini's character.
Daniel. I just looked it up. Yeah.
I wonder if, and knowing that he is kind of, trying to go up the ladder in the Fisk camp, as it were, like maybe he does a thing where he tries to take her out or something, like she's starting to get a little too close and he realizes like, I'm kind of the one that introduced this snake in the chicken coop, so to speak. So I got to be the one to end it. So I'm curious to see what happens there, but it is cool. And it is a cool way to still have somebody in that Ben Ulrich role with him obviously not being there anymore. So it's cool to have that sort of, inside reporter there who I also not in a reporter role, but I also feel like Cherry's going to be a little bit of that too. Sort of just a private detective trying to seek out the truth of what really is going on. And I think both of the actors were very good in what we saw. So I think both of them are solid additions for sure.
And I think it modernizes it a little bit with the like report on the street thing and the way it's being presented. And it's kind of like almost like a TikTok video kind of thing that you're seeing. But I think she's doing something really courageous there. And I think like I'm just like, man, her father would be so proud of her. But also her father would be like, get out of there. Get out of there. Like
he would have been like, don't come on so strong right away. Ask some actual questions before you get into. So what's up with your wife, dude? You know what I mean? She definitely showed her experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be interested to see where they go with her because we don't know like where she kind of lands on this. If she suspects anything about Fisk or like. Obviously, she's trying to get some information about the Vanessa side of stuff, but how did she really get to know Daniel to be able to get to this position is something I'll be wondering. But so far, she's been pretty unbiased, right? Like she hasn't done anything to really show her cards to me, even on like what she thinks about New York. When she's interviewing those people in the street, it's very like, what do you think? And just she lets them ramble, right?
Fisk even mentions that she was like a big reason that he connected with the under 30 club. So yeah.
So maybe she's falling for his charm or just amplifying the view, right? By sharing her stuff to the younger crowd that ends up making them like him.
So actually, Fisk does make the comment about like she seems like she's used to being underestimated. We'll use that. I wonder if it's going to be a thing where they sort of use that to try to get her on their side and to essentially be, the
state-run media.
Exactly. I could totally see that.
Like she'll be our communications rep, and she'll be, the one at the podium answering questions for me because I like your spunk, and it's like
Fisk
right.
News. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Fisk, though, I feel like we haven't really talked too much about him in this episode, and I kind of want to see where you guys are at, like with him temperature-wise, because throughout the first episode, I don't know if it was just maybe me reading it wrong, but it genuinely felt like he had good intentions, and the things that he wanted to do wasn't just, this huge power play like it is in the comics in Devil's Reign that we all just read recently. It seemed like he genuinely just kind of wanted to make New York a better place and to move on from that sort of life that he used to live. Like we see that scene when he walks in, when Vanessa's with the heads of the 5 families, and he seems so removed from it. And he's just kind of talking to her about like, not really being in that life anymore and stuff. And then we get episode 2, and it's like the second Detective Gallo gets under his skin. It's like, actually, let's just, go back to like taking pictures of people's families and extorting them and blackmailing them and all that stuff. And it's like, well, old Fisk is back. So like, I don't have too much of a read on him right now in terms of like, what is the end goal here with him being mayor? Is it really just to have all the power? Is there a more humane kind of, what does Gallo say? The monster trying to salvage his reputation. Is it something like that? Like, where are you guys at?
I think. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh yeah, sorry. I never know what to chime in, but I think that Wilson Fisk is the hero of his own story, and I think he thinks he's in the right even when he's wrong, and when he's doing horrible things, he's a master at rationalizing it. So I think there's a part of it that is noble, and I think there's a part of it that is completely not noble, and I think he's got a split dichotomy, just like Matt does with Daredevil, Kingpin and Mayor Fisk, Matt Murdock and Daredevil. I think that's going to mirror itself out throughout the season.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Even in the original show, what does he say? I forget the exact line, but when he talks about still wearing the cufflinks, he's like, to remind myself that I don't do evil just for the sake of evil. There's always basically trying to say that he was like better than his father. So yeah, Chris, that's the hero of his own story thing is definitely accurate.
Yeah, no, I think he is trying to do good for the city the way he sees it. But of course, he is driven by a vendetta against vigilantes because of Daredevil, because of Echo, because of these characters that have caused him problems financially or physically. So I think he is very proud of the fact that so far he has held his end of the bargain to Matt that they made in season 3. So in that sense, he is like, hey, I have changed. And I do think he thinks he has changed. But the thing is, when you are a powerful person, once you become mayor, and you have a person telling you no, that your aide has already said, if you don't have the cops, you don't really have anything. You'll lose the city. He has to fall back on old reliable, right? And it is, I'll look at this. You have like a secret son or whatever. I'm going to blackmail you with this.
And I love cheesesteak.
Yeah, and he doesn't actually like cheesesteaks.
And he's like, this sandwich was disgusting.
But I think it's
So
like one of those things. And for his sake, he's probably thinking, this will get him in line, and I didn't actually have to do it. He can excuse it away. Did I actually hurt anybody with this? No. I just needed him to fall in line. And now everybody's happy. Everybody's fine. And I even just filled a pothole that has been sitting there forever.
Yeah. That was a great scene, by the way. Do you think that was No Way Home related? Like
I saw people say that. I don't think it is. I think it's just another.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little too late, but man, that would be cool for some interconnectivity because we do get the mention of Spider-Man in episode 1 or 2, I forget, but
2, I believe.
So
Maybe 1.
At the very least, they're setting up that at some point Spider-Man's gonna play into this.
That scene at the gravesite, like when like the guy's telling him off, saying he's going to make him the shortest term mayor. How much do you think, like in the back of your head, he's like, he just wants to introduce this guy's skull with a car door?
Yeah.
And Gallo reads him down basically perfect. You know, he says it, once a thug, always a thug. And then he's like, all right, once a thug, always a thug. I guess that's what I'll be then. Here's your illegitimate child and your mistress. Like,
yeah.
So it's going to be that sort of, I think, slow decline back into the slamming heads into car doors Fisk that we're used to.
Yeah, I think probably by the end of this season, he will be fully back to Kingpin, in the sense of like, I am not going to let this slip from my grasp. I have power. And like he calls it out too, Gallo, he says, so you're giving up more power to be the mayor. Like as the Kingpin, he had more power. So it's like, that's why I do think he was honestly trying to do good and keep to their deal. And maybe, like you said, rehabilitate his image among the populace. And it seemed like it worked. They're like, hey, he's a criminal, but he's interesting. I'll watch the debate. I'll vote for him. Yeah. And he wins.
God, it's a little too close to home.
Yeah. It's funny. If this show came out like 10 years ago, we'd be like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. We have the mayor's aide talking to him about how he's doing on social media and memes. Like, this is ridiculous. No, it's actually the world we live in. One more thing on Fisk, though, I do want to talk about before we move on from him. So we did see in Echo, he had that sort of optical like thing in his eye that allowed him to pick up the sign language and the heart rate and like all those things. Do we think that's going to come back around in this show? Because that would be a hell of a benefit to have if you're going up against somebody like Daredevil.
No, I think that was for Echo, and I think I don't think he has it.
Okay. I just thought it might be a cool, like, sort. It almost kind of like mirrors a little bit what Daredevil can do, because he's hypersensitive to the things like the heart rate and the like all these internal things, and that was basically what this device allowed him to use. So I thought that was kind of cool. Or maybe like if Matt were to get his hands on something like that to kind of help heighten his own senses. Just I don't know. It felt like a weird thing to just throw in there for one show, but they could basically just have scrapped everything that came of Echo after the show.
They reference it at least. That's
they do.
They did reference it a few times. That's pretty good. Yeah. The other side of Fisk, he does want to save his marriage. They're in some trouble here, so he goes to a marriage counselor, which happens to be Matt Murdock's girlfriend currently. Or are they girlfriend and boyfriend yet? We don't really know. They've been on like a date or two.
They are for this week until Matt moves on to somebody else, because that's the biggest man whore in all of comics. Like Johnny Storm doesn't have a prayer by the time he gets here. Like that role is spoken for, bro.
Dick Grayson is kind of up there too.
No, I'm saying in the MCU, like
fair
that
enough.
role. That role is spoken for. Johnny don't have a prayer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was she is a very famous therapist, I guess, because she has a book and like she had a signing. That seems to be why Fisk maybe sought her out. But she also had a fan that came up to her, and I think this guy has been confirmed to be playing Muse, who's going to be a villain in the show. Now, Muse is a fairly new villain in the last 9 years. He was in Charles Soule's run, Daredevil. I have not seen Muse in the comics, really, but he has some, if you read up on his history, there's it could go some dark places with Muse.
Yeah. Very cool. And I also think it's going to be a very cool thing how I think that Heather's book is going to be what sort of like prompts him to dive into that, sort of embrace his darker side. Because the book she wrote is called Live Without Fear. I think it's going to be a thing where he just totally like basically what the cops did with the Punisher thing, just like warps and twists the message of that book to fit his own sort of dementedness, maybe even like kidnaps her, you know.
That's what I was going to say. He's probably going to like stalk her, kidnap her.
Yep.
Look at me putting your work to work. Like, look at me putting your words to work, you know, type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. As he creates paintings with some homeless guy's innards. Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah.
It's going to be rough.
Yeah. No, he's messed up.
I like what they did here, though, too, because he asked for, like, are you seeing new patients? And she says yes. And when she cancels with Matt or whatever and says, hey, I have a new patient showing up, I'm thinking it's going to be him. And then Fisk walks in, and you're like, oh, okay. Like, they set it up to, like, really lead you into thinking, oh, it's going to be that guy that asked her about it. But then it becomes Fisk and Vanessa, and, you know, they're working on their marriage here.
Mm-hmm. Instantly gave me Sopranos vibes of like Tony walking in with his therapist.
Yeah, very much so.
Before we go, I do want to talk about Kirsten McDuffie. She has been, you know, a Daredevil character for quite some time. And love interest, right, at times. So where do we see her going at in this? Right now, she is like, it's McDuffie and Murdoch, right? Or Murdoch and McDuffie, that they're working together now that NMP is done. Do we see, like, so far she's kind of been the foggy role of helping him get clients, or hey, maybe we shouldn't take this case, he's a cop killer or alleged cop killer, and that whole thing with White Tiger, which I think is really interesting as well, because he has connections to cops with Cherry and everything, and he's walking a dangerous line with taking this as they're all watching him in the courtroom. But what do we think of Kirsten McDuffie and like what her role will be? Is it something that like she sets them up with Heather and Matt, but do we see maybe Heather does die from Muse or something, and they end up in her loss of a friend, you know, in the arms of Matt Murdock or something?
I can see it.
Chris, you set it off. Yeah.
I can see it. So here's my thing. I think she is a character that the show can do anything they want with. Like I feel like, yeah, she's a Daredevil character, but I don't think that people are going to be like, they have to do this or this with her. I think it's a pretty blank slate. I think they're going to go the therapist route as long as they can. And when that devolves, I think she's there. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I think maybe a season 2 love romance with her could happen.
I personally hope they don't, just because it seems like every single woman character that gets introduced in Daredevil, Matt ends up having to have some kind of romance with her. I do, you know, my sort of end game for Matt would still, of course, be Karen. And I think having her more in that role of just the cooler head of the team, you know what I mean? The one that, like Jordan referenced, keeps Matt level-headed and things and knows what's best at the end of the day in that sort of foggy role, I think is a lot better and a lot more impactful. And I think to just reduce that to she's the next one in line, I think would kind of take away from the impact of the character. I think she'll be received a lot better and she'll have a lot more staying power if she's just a very prominent sort of angel on Matt's shoulder the whole time.
Angel for the devil. I like it.
Exactly.
All right. I guess let's quickly touch on White Tiger before we get out of here. He was trying to help somebody without his amulet or costume on, right? And ends up dirty cop ends up getting hit by a truck by a train,
There
subway
you
train.
go.
I can get plane, trains, and automobiles. All of it.
Fantastic movie. Fantastic movie.
He ends up getting hit by a train, and he gets arrested. They try to act like this guy doesn't exist who he helped. And when they find out where he is, the cops are going to go kill him. That's when, Matt has to spring into action here. But, his wife doesn't even really want to be there. He's kind of got nobody with him at all. But Matt overhears them like beating on him to get a confession out, and he goes in and interrupts. So I don't know how long this storyline will last, but I'm really intrigued by White Tiger.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to last very long. I think he is being used as the proxy to show basically the effects of what Fisk's plans for New York will have on all vigilantes. Like that he's just the first one that's kind of having to go through this system, been arrested. Although they don't, they also don't know at the time that he is White Tiger, of course. And they make a point in this episode to like say that that's going to be omitted from the defense. I don't think that's going to be the case at all. I think 100% the fact that he's a vigilante is going to be used against him. And I think that's basically what his role in the show is going to be. Like I said, just to show what Fisk's plan is for vigilantes and how he plans on dealing with them, and also how the people see vigilantes, because this jury is going to be the ones judging him. And when they find out, how do they use that? Do they use that like Matt feared against him? More prejudice than probably blah, 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 legal term. Like what do they do there? So I don't think his role in the show is going to be too long, but I think it's going to be very important in that way, that it's going to be the first of many vigilantes that get locked up, I would say.
It's really interesting because he is. I think he acted very, very well in this. There is a lot of personal stuff going on with them, but I also love that scene that you mentioned where they get it dismissed as evidence, right? Because I was starting to think that the judge was going to be kind of paid off, or with how quick he was with the bail hearing, where it was a 5-minute at most hearing that they had. It was like, nope, he's a cop killer allegedly, so we're just not, and no matter what Matt said, it was kind of like, whatever, I'm not, and the truth is, right, he is a veteran of the military, they said, and he is somebody that has no priors or anything on his record. So that's not enough to overcome what the evidence. It's also surprised there's no camera down there, I guess, in the subway tunnel. I thought there would have been.
Yeah.
Well, that might come into play at some point.
Maybe
they're dirty cops that made sure the camera wasn't on or something.
True,
maybe that gets used against them.
Or maybe Fisk gets to this judge and's like, yeah, I know you said they won't be able to use this, but actually you are going to do it because
mistrial.
I'm telling you.
Mistrial.
Yeah.
One thing to highlight as well to White Tiger, his amulet, they mention it being mystical, right? It comes from Kunlun in the comics. So if we are thinking it is the same here, there's ties to the rest of the defenders with that. He's also a defender at times in the comics. So,
and it's a mantle that gets passed around too. So like, if they wanted to keep the character around despite the actor no longer being with us, there's precedent for the character's sister having the mantle. There's been a few people that have been White Tiger. So it's a character that is really cool in concept. I'd love to see them brought back in some
costume looks great. The costume looks so good.
Yeah.
And they mention him before he's been active for a while, because they mention him before Bullseye attacks the Josies. It's on the TV where they talk about Daredevil and White Tiger cleaning up the streets and stuff, and they show the clip of him. So
where was Bro during the Battle of New York? That's where I want to know.
Wasn't active yet. The incident, as they call it, right?
Yes. The incident. Yeah. during
By the way,
the is this canon or is it not canon era.
Yeah, I'm reading the MCU book, and they kind of mention it, and that this stuff was created without Marvel Studios really having any input. And especially like when Agents of Shield came out, how I think one of the parts that Feige was upset with Joss Whedon for going to create that show. Because it wasn't originally part of it. And then they had to be like at certain times, like Marvel Entertainment would put the pressure on them. They're like, fine, we'll give you Sam Jackson for an episode, or we'll give you, Kobe Smulders or something. Like, just funny to see the dynamics that were going back and forth between those two departments. And the chapter I'm in right now is about like all of that, like Marvel Entertainment against Marvel Studios, Perlmutter versus Feige, all that stuff. So really interesting. But these shows were always meant to be MCU on the Marvel television side of things, but Marvel Studios is kind of like, we're not really paying attention to you.
Yeah.
Until now, because they realized how popular Daredevil was. All right, any last thoughts before we wrap up for today?
No,
I think we covered it.
I think we tied everything up in a pretty good bow. I'm excited to see what comes. I'm excited to see Punisher. I'm excited to see Muse. We got the first piece of the puzzle last night, and seems like it's going to be a pretty badass puzzle once it's all put together by the end. So super excited.
I just am happy that we have a win as fans. It feels like we needed a win as fans, and for the most part, like if you just ignore the idiots, we got to win as fans, and it's kind of fun.
Yes, we feel born again after Brave New World.
Yeah.
I should say the reception to Brave New World, because we all enjoyed it. But nobody else fucking did, apparently. Anyway, we don't need to get into it.
There's also just like, as we wrap up here, like I understand there's hardcore Netflix Daredevil fans. Nothing would have appeased you, or like you were worried about the show going into it, whatever. Like I really loved seeing him with the Billy Club and going through the city flipping and stuff. Like that's also Daredevil, and for some people that's too comic booky or whatever, even though the Hand was reviving Elektra and everything. Like I mean, like that's comic booky too, right? But I understand it, but there is also this online push, I think, to make things sound as negative as they can. When you say the show premieres or the show has a 82 or 83% Rotten Tomatoes score, the second lowest of the series, when there's only 4 seasons, it's very disingenuous. And it's very much pushing an agenda. Because one, this is not that same show, but even if you want to include it in there, there's only 4 seasons. So one of them is going to be second the worst, right? And one of them is going to be the worst.
Yeah.
And you're trying to highlight it as if this is worse than the original show, when the original show has actually one of the lowest scores when you talk about Daredevil season 2. So whatever. People, I think there's some revisionist history going on with the original show.
Oh yeah.
People acting like it is a masterpiece. There are issues with the original show as well. The season 2 is one of those that I enjoyed the first watch, but the second watch I had a tougher time with it once the Punisher arc was done. Where it kind of slogs through. And I remember people complaining even back then about pacing being too long. Why have 13 episodes when you can do it in 8? Now we get 8 or 9 and people say it's too rushed. Spread it out some. It's like, just pick a lane. But the whole show's not done either. Like I don't think people have kind of been used to the original Netflix model where you were able to binge it all. And they would not have stopped at episode 2. They would have kept going, and maybe you would have felt better about the season. The people that have seen the full season are very high on the back half of the season.
And the audience scores are great too. It's just the critics. The critics,
What I'll also say to wrap it up, anybody that says of course it sucks because it's Disney. Disney created the original show too. Netflix just distributed it on their platform, but ABC Studios is the place that made all of those Netflix shows that was under Marvel Television, which was under Marvel Entertainment, which was a Disney subsidiary at that time. So you can't even blame Disney. But that's it. Okay.
Yep.
At Soups and Sabers on all of our social medias. If you want to reach out to us, give us your thoughts on Daredevil Born Again. We're going to have your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man soon as well. Scheduling with that has been kind of tough. And then we just had our DC Villains suit draft with Whitney Van Lanningham that premiered on the channel. So go check that out. And coming up soon, in the next week or two, we will have our DC Heroes suit draft with Andy DiGenova from Holy Batcast. So make sure you check that out as well. Thank you all for watching and listening, and we will catch you next time.